When a man ignores you, it's not just silence, it's a test of your worth, your patience, and your self-respect. And here's the truth. If you don't respond the right way, you hand him the power. But if you do it correctly, you don't just protect your dignity, you crush his ego without saying a word. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. When a man ignores you, the first instinct is to react. You want answers. You want to demand an explanation. You want to know why he's suddenly gone cold when yesterday he was warm. But here's where you need to understand something. Silence is not always a weakness. Silence, when used correctly, is power. Most men expect you to chase when they pull away. They want you to send the long texts, to blow up their phone, to demand their time and energy. Because the moment you do that, they know they have you exactly where they want you, under their control, seeking validation from someone who is intentionally withholding it. And that's how their ego grows. But when you meet silence with silence, that ego doesn't get fed. Instead, it gets starved. Think about it like this. Attention is fuel. Every time you call, text, beg, or try to win him back, you are pouring gasoline on his ego. He sits there thinking, I'm so important to her, she can't live without me. I can ignore her, and she'll still chase me. But when you step back and refuse to give that fuel, suddenly the engine that drives his pride begins to stall. He starts to wonder, wait a second, why isn't she reacting? Why isn't she trying to pull me back? And that wondering eats at him more than any angry word ever could. Now, I'm not telling you to play games or be petty. I'm telling you to recognize your worth. Silence is not revenge. It's a declaration that your peace is too valuable to be disrupted by someone who can't see it. And men notice that. Trust me, they notice. When you don't respond the way they expected, you flip the script. They planned the play, but you rewrote the ending. That confusion rattles the ego more than shouting, arguing, or chasing ever could. Here's the thing: silence gives you back control. You're not waiting by the phone anymore. You're not losing sleep over someone who chose not to value you. Instead, you're reclaiming your time, your thoughts, and your energy. And when he finally realizes that his absence didn't shake you, that you didn't crumble, that you didn't beg, he has no choice but to sit with the truth that he is not as powerful as he thought. That realization, that's the ego hit. And let me make this clear, your silence is not emptiness. It's full of strength, full of dignity, full of the message that says, if you can't see my value, then I'll show you through my absence. And that absence will echo louder than any words you could ever send. So the next time a man ignores you, don't panic, don't chase, and don't hand him your energy. Give him nothing to feed off of. Let the silence do the work. Because silence doesn't just protect your peace, it destroys his ego. When a man ignores you, it's easy to let your mind spiral into a place of overthinking. You start questioning yourself. What did I do wrong? Am I not enough? Did I say something to push him away? That cycle can consume you if you let it. But here's where the real shift happens. Instead of giving your energy to him, you redirect it back to you. Because the most powerful response to being ignored isn't begging for his attention. It's showing him, and more importantly yourself, that your world doesn't stop because someone decided to withdraw. Every ounce of energy you're tempted to pour into checking your phone, drafting a message, or replaying conversations in your head can be redirected into building yourself up. Go to the gym and push your limits. Invest in your appearance, not because you're trying to make him notice, but because you want to feel your own glow when you walk into a room. Work on your goals, sharpen your skills, pour into your hobbies. Remind yourself that you are more than someone's option. Because when you focus inward, you begin to shine outward, and that shine is impossible to ignore. Here's the truth men notice when a woman starts pouring into herself. They may not say it, but they feel it. When he expected you to be sitting there waiting for him, but instead you're posting your progress, looking more confident, standing taller, living better, that stings. It stings because it reveals something he didn't expect. He thought pulling away would make you shrink, but instead it made you grow. And nothing crushes an ego faster than realizing that his absence didn't weaken you, it elevated you. And let's be honest, the more you focus on you, the less you even care about his silence. You stop obsessing over what he's doing, who he's with, or why he's ignoring you, because you're too busy becoming someone stronger, sharper, and more fulfilled. That's the beauty of redirection. The pain that was supposed to break you becomes the fuel that builds you. That's the kind of transformation no man can ignore, even if he tries. Now, this isn't about being fake. It's not about pretending you don't care while secretly waiting for him to notice. This is about genuinely realizing that his attention is not the source of your worth. You don't need his validation to glow. You don't need his approval to rise. The minute you stop chasing what's running from you and start chasing your own potential, you put yourself in a place of unstoppable power. And here's what happens. When you redirect your energy, you create a contrast he can't escape. He remembers the version of you that would have begged, and now he's faced with a version of you that's thriving without him. That gap, that undeniable difference, is what destroys his ego, because it tells him in no uncertain terms, "You were never the source of my light. I was always the light." So when a man ignores you, don't let it break you. Let it push you. Take that energy, all of it, and reinvest it into yourself until your growth speaks louder than any words you could say. Because nothing dismantles a man's ego more than realizing you didn't just survive without him. You leveled up. One of the biggest mistakes people make when someone starts ignoring them is overcompensating. You start giving more, you start trying harder, you start pouring effort into a situation that's already draining you. And here's the reality, the more you give when someone is giving less, the more they feel entitled to that imbalance. That's why one of the most powerful ways to destroy a man's ego when he ignores you is to match his effort, not his excuses. If he gives little, you give little. If he pulls away, you don't close the gap for him. You let the space exist. Because the moment you keep filling in what he takes away, you train him to believe that his inconsistency will always be rewarded with your consistency. That is how ego grows, by knowing you'll show up twice as hard when he barely shows up at all. But when you mirror his behavior, when you give him back exactly what he puts in, suddenly he's forced to sit in the reflection of his own effort. And trust me, that's not an image most men like to see. This isn't about playing games. It's about balance. A healthy connection is built on reciprocity, not one person carrying the weight while the other gets comfortable. So when he starts ignoring, don't overextend yourself. Don't justify his behavior with excuses like, "Oh, he's just busy," or "maybe he's going through something." Life gets busy for everyone, but someone who values you makes time for you. And the moment you start making excuses for his lack of effort, you're teaching him that you'll tolerate it. That tolerance is what inflates his ego. Now, imagine instead that you stop pouring in more than he does. You stop chasing, you stop over-explaining, you stop stretching yourself thin just to keep the connection alive. You simply match what he gives. He texts once a week. Fine, you respond on the same level. He shows half interest, you show half. What happens then is powerful. He starts to notice that he's no longer in control of the dynamic. The expectation that you'll do the heavy lifting disappears, and what's left is the realization that the relationship is as empty as the effort he's putting in. And that truth doesn't feel good to the ego, because men who ignore often do it to test their power. They want to see if you'll tolerate crumbs, if you'll fight for their attention while they give you the bare minimum. But when you refuse to do more than him, when you calmly mirror his investment, he sees that his absence doesn't give him leverage. It exposes him. That exposure forces him to confront the fact that he is replaceable. And nothing dismantles an ego faster than being faced with the reality that someone else isn't dependent on them. Here's the beauty in matching effort. It keeps your dignity intact. You're not begging. You're not lowering yourself. You're not proving your worth to someone who's ignoring it. You're simply holding the mirror up and saying without words, if this is what you give, this is what you get. That calm consistency is stronger than any emotional reaction. Because instead of feeding his ego with desperate attention, you're starving it by refusing to give more than he deserves. And in the end, he'll either step up or he'll step away. But either way, his ego takes the hit, because when you match his effort and nothing more, he realizes he's no longer the one setting the rules. You are. When a man ignores you, the reaction he expects is emotion. He expects anger, he expects frustration, he expects you to demand answers. That's the trap. Because the moment you let emotion take over, you hand him confirmation that he still has control over your mood, your peace, and your thoughts. But when you engage with confidence instead of emotion, you flip the script entirely. You shift from being predictable to being powerful. Confidence is not about shouting louder or pretending you don't care. Confidence is calm. It's controlled. It's the ability to respond without losing yourself in the process. Imagine he finally decides to text after days of silence. He's waiting for that long message from you, filled with hurt and confusion, something he can read and think, she's still hooked. But instead, he gets a short, clear, and composed reply. No drama, no begging, no explanation, just calmness. That calmness doesn't just surprise him, it unsettles him. Because it tells him that his silence didn't shake you the way he hoped it would. When you speak with confidence, you communicate a powerful message without ever saying it directly. I don't need you to validate me. I don't need you to reassure me. I know my worth. And men feel that. They may not always admit it, but they feel it deeply. An ego thrives on your emotional reaction, on knowing they can push your buttons. But when you stay steady, when you don't rise to the bait, that ego has nothing to feed on. The key here is subtlety. You're not cutting him off with rudeness or trying to prove a point through anger. You're simply standing firm in who you are. When you're calm, when your words are measured, when you don't over-explain yourself, you show strength, and strength in silence always carries more weight than shouting ever could. Think about it, anyone can get angry, but not everyone can remain composed. Composure is rare, and what's rare is valuable. Now, let's be real. Confidence doesn't mean you don't feel hurt. It doesn't mean his silence didn't sting, but it does mean you choose not to let that hurt dictate how you respond. You take a breath, you remind yourself of your value, and you act from a place of clarity, not chaos. That's what keeps the power in your hands, because the one who controls the tone of the interaction controls the outcome. Here's the part that breaks his ego the most, when he realizes he no longer has the ability to rattle you. If ignoring you doesn't make you chase, if texting you after days doesn't make you explode, if his silence doesn't drag you into desperation, then what power does he really have? None. And that realization hits harder than anything you could ever say to him. So when a man ignores you and you decide to respond, do it with calm confidence. Don't let him hear frustration in your voice or see desperation in your words. Let him feel the weight of your composure. Because when you engage with confidence instead of emotion, you're not just protecting your dignity, you're crushing his ego in the quietest, most undeniable way. One of the most damaging assumptions a man can make when he starts ignoring you is that he is your only option. He convinces himself that no matter how little he gives, no matter how much distance he creates, you'll always be there waiting. That belief feeds his ego. It makes him feel irreplaceable. And the fastest way to dismantle that illusion is to expand your options, not out of spite, not as a game, but as a declaration that your life is bigger than one person's inconsistent attention. When you begin opening yourself up to new experiences, new people, new opportunities, you send a clear signal you're not stuck. You're not trapped in the waiting room of his silence. You're moving forward. That movement is powerful because it puts you back in control of your story. While he's off trying to test your patience, you're building connections, surrounding yourself with people who actually see your value, and creating moments that remind you of your own worth. And here's the truth. He notices. Even if he doesn't say it, even if he tries to act indifferent, men have a sharp awareness of when a woman's energy starts shifting away from them. Expanding your options doesn't always mean jumping into another relationship. It can be as simple as saying yes to opportunities you used to pass on because you were waiting on him. Go out with friends, accept that invitation to network, spend time with people who uplift you. Put yourself in spaces where you're celebrated, not tolerated. Because every time you do, you remind yourself that the world is full of people who would never dream of ignoring you. And that realization is where your strength grows. The shift is psychological too. When your attention is no longer centered on him, you stop feeding his ego. That starving effect is brutal because he's not just losing your presence, he's losing the assurance that you're still orbiting around him. And what makes it sting even more is the realization that others might now be receiving what he carelessly discarded: your time, your laughter, your energy, your glow. This isn't about making him jealous. It's about reminding yourself that he doesn't define your desirability. You define it. And when you live that truth, it naturally rattles his pride. Because his ego counted on your world shrinking without him. Instead, it expanded. And there is nothing more threatening to a man's ego than realizing that while he was busy ignoring you, you were busy becoming someone he no longer has access to in the same way. Now, the real power lies in your indifference. You're not going out of your way to flaunt your options or rub them in his face. You're simply living your life fully. That quiet confidence is what cuts deeper than any words could, because it says without saying, I don't need to chase you. I don't need to beg for your attention. I am desired, I am valued, and I am free. And that's when his ego crumbles, because he finally sees what he tried to ignore, the truth that you were never bound to him in the first place. So when a man ignores you, don't narrow your world to his silence. Broaden it, step into new opportunities, explore new connections, and remind yourself that he is not your only option. Because nothing destroys a man's ego faster than realizing you never needed him to complete you. The greatest power you have when a man ignores you is not in what you say, not in what you post, and not in how you try to get his attention back. The greatest power is in your ability to detach and elevate. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring overnight. It doesn't mean you erase every feeling you once had, and it doesn't mean you become cold or bitter. Detachment means you take back the energy you were pouring into someone else and you redirect it toward yourself and your future. It means you refuse to let his silence dictate your value. And the moment you do that, you step into a level of strength that he never expected you to reach. See, men often rely on the idea that you'll hold on. That even if they pull away, you'll still be there waiting, hoping, clinging to the possibility that things will go back to how they were. That expectation is what props up their ego. They feel secure knowing they can come and go and you'll still remain in place. But when you detach, when you show through your actions that his silence no longer has the power to hold you hostage, that's when his ego takes the biggest hit. Because detachment strips him of the illusion of control. And here's where elevation comes in. Detachment by itself is powerful, but pairing it with growth is unstoppable. When you rise, when you keep building yourself, when you keep choosing peace and purpose, instead of chasing someone who ignores you, you show that his absence didn't break you. It built you. You're not just walking away, you're walking up. You're creating distance, but you're also creating progress. And progress is something no ego can compete with. Think about it. When you detach, you stop reacting to the silence. You stop replaying the story in your head, you stop wondering why, and instead, you start deciding what's next. You shift from questions like, what did I do wrong? To affirmations like, what can I do right for myself? That mindset shift changes everything. Because while he's stuck in the comfort of believing you'll never let go, you're out there proving that you can and that you will. The beauty of detachment is that it's quiet. You don't announce it. You don't need to tell him you're done. You don't need to broadcast your every move. You just move. And in that quietness, he begins to feel the difference. The absence of your attention, the absence of your energy, the absence of your presence, that absence becomes louder to him than any words you could ever say. And as you elevate, as you continue to grow, he starts to see that ignoring you didn't lower your value, it exposed his inability to recognize it. That realization is a dagger to the ego, because the one thing a man who ignores you doesn't expect is for you to rise higher without him. He expects you to shrink. He expects you to chase. He expects you to crumble. But instead, you elevate. So remember this: when a man ignores you, the most devastating response isn't anger, it isn't revenge, it isn't even indifference alone. It's detaching with grace and elevating with purpose. Because nothing destroys a man's ego more than realizing you didn't just let go, you leveled up.